All right, and we are live here with Jack Broudy from BroudyTennis.com. Jack is the founder of the nonlinear tennis system. Jack is a tennis player, a tennis coach, a speaker, an author, an inventor. You've coached several current touring pros, college national champions, top-ranked juniors, and the list goes on and on. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thanks, Will.
So we met a few years back. We were introduced through a college teammate of mine who coaches an academy now in Birmingham, Alabama. JC is his name. And we worked a little bit together on a project. We worked on your website. We launched a serve course. And I remember the first time that I saw the video of you teaching this complete beginner how to serve. And I was like, oh my gosh, the way that these coaches have been teaching the serve is so much less effective than what Jack is doing here. And you taught this guy how to serve in like 20 minutes. So
I remember.
I don't want this to sound like a, like a magic, I don't know, one of those like infomercial things, right? But it really is effective, what you've got going on. So I wanted to start, and I'm really excited about this because you're the first guest we've had that we're going to talk about technique. I'd never talk about technique on this podcast. We only focus on strategy. One of the reasons for that is because I think there's so many coaches out there who have these different technique philosophies, and I just don't trust a lot of them. But I'm excited to have you on to talk about that. So real quick, let's start out in 60 seconds or less-ish. If you can describe to the listeners what your nonlinear tennis system is all about.
In a brief message, it's basically nonlinear. The idea of no straight lines. Mm-hmm. The only line we really consider is the 45-degree angle to the net. Like when you see the players go right to that line or right to that 45, it's that 45-degree angle between the net and the side fence. Right there. The rest of it is all nonlinear. The idea of you're always in a coil. You're either winding or unwinding. Mm-hmm. So that's basically what it is, because I think that the strokes are taught in a linear way. You know, people will say, oh, you go up and out or across and through or load up on your foot, which indicates you're going to stop. I'm much more into the idea of being fluid and absorbing the hit with your entire body rather than any one piece of your body moving at one time. When one part of your body moves, every part of your body moves. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by nonlinear. So even the idea, like this year, the new buzzword is what? A unit turn. But I don't see it that way. When I see Federer and those guys, you see their hips move first, and then the shoulders catch up. So it's not really a unit turn. It's overly simplistic.
Right.
So, yep.
Yeah. The way I like to think about it, having seen a few of your lessons on the court, is that a lot of these coaches teach very mechanically, as if we're like robots, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to teach the serve. So foot up to the line, hands forward, drop your right hand, toss the ball, racket on your shoulder. It's like one step after the next, as if there's no like continuity between each step. And that we'll dive deep into this later, but that, the first time I saw that lesson, I remember I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. Like you're definitely not going in kind of straight lines or step by step to hit.
Yeah. I remember my lessons were terrible as a kid serving, right? He'd have you hold the racket here and then practice your toss as if the left arm is completely independent of the right arm. Right. And that's really, if you watch the players on TV, when they move, everything moves together. Right. And it's like a rosebud, just in a time lapse, as you see it unfold, it unfolds in a round way where everything moves. Mm-hmm. And you can't just focus on one side or the other side. And that, I think on the serve, that's really a big deal. Yeah. People have a lot of trouble with their serve. Yeah. More than any other stroke, probably.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty technical stroke. So we're going to dive into that a little bit later. I wanted to start with your story. I mentioned that You're a tennis player, coach, speaker, author, inventor. You've accomplished a lot over your career. But let's go all the way back. How did you get started in tennis?
In my short 66-year career, yeah. Well, mine's, probably a pretty typical story. My dad was starting to take lessons at the tennis club where I belonged. We belonged to just a little swimming tennis club back in Connecticut. And I was playing Little League. I was playing baseball, and I was a baseball freak. I just, I knew every statistic, and I just loved baseball. And then I played soccer in the fall and basketball in the winter and wrestling a little bit. And then I just kind of like other people, I just got addicted to hitting the ball. And I like the sport. And, in baseball, you could sit there all day in center field and not, if you got a good pitcher, you never see any action. Then you bat every nine players you get up to bat. So there just wasn't enough action as a little 12-year-old. And I like tennis because it was all you. You're either serving and playing the point or returning and playing the point. There was no one else to blame. But in soccer, I played a lot of soccer, and all the other sports, you might end up just running up and down the field for a long time and not even see the ball. So I think that's what really got me involved was my dad really enjoying tennis, and he was leaving golf because he felt the same way about golf. He was like, hey, just not enough exercise for me. I got to spend the whole day there, and I get more exercise in an hour and a half of tennis. So I really took it up because of my dad.
So you're in Connecticut growing up. You played a lot of juniors, right? And you were
I did
nationally ranked and all that sort of thing. Talk us through that, and then how you got to become a coach.
I really didn't. I was always envious of the California kids, which is probably why I moved out here when I was 19 years old, because they got to play all year round. I mean, when you're in Connecticut, unless you have a lot of money, you can only play or do what I did, which was string a lot of rackets for the coach. You can only play once or twice in the wintertime, because the indoor court time is so difficult to get, so expensive, that you become a four-letter man. I would just do all kinds of sports. But after a few years, and I did okay in tournaments, 12 and unders, 14 and unders, I didn't do much. But by the end of the 14 and unders, I really wanted to specialize. I wanted to be good at one thing, and that one thing was tennis. So I kind of quit the other sports sort of fell off for me. And I really focused on tennis right around 14 and 15. And that's when I took it seriously. And like I said, I played indoors a couple times a week in exchange for stringing the rackets and stuff like that and helping. Sure. Same with the summer. I would sweep the courts every hour just so I could play tennis there all day. So it was one of those real grassroots story, you know what I mean? Real 60s, 70s type of story. Kind of like the way it is in Europe now still. When I go to Europe, it's very, they just hang around. Everybody hangs around all day and plays, not like in America anymore. Here it's, you book your court time, you play, and then you're gone. Yeah. But in Spain and France, they just hang out and have lunch and then play some more and then play doubles and hit against the wall. So that's kind of how it was way back when,
Interesting. So then you played in college, correct?
Yeah, I played the first couple of years, or first year really, for Chapel Hill. And then I kind of redshirted the next year because I wasn't seeing enough action. The team was too good. They were 7th in the nation. Wow. And, and most of their players were from the South or from the West. And and I just was a little out of my league there, playing mostly 7 or 8, which means occasionally you get to play some dubs. You get to work out with the team every day. And I got to eat at the training table. Food was great, but I wasn't seeing enough action. So I became friends with some guys at UC San Diego. Mm-hmm. And even though that was a D3 school and I came from a D1 school, I was a little bit of a bigger fish in a smaller pond. So I kind of enjoyed my time at UCSD a little more than Chapel Hill, even though I love the school. Chapel Hill was a great school, and so was UCSD. But I got to see a whole lot more action, singles and doubles. So I was playing a lot more. So it made sense for me to go to UCSD.
Got it. Would you say you were a better singles or doubles player?
In those days, doubles. Today, even at my ripe old age, singles. I like to play singles. Oh, yeah.
It's the opposite, I feel like.
Yeah, it's usually the opposite. No, being a kid from Connecticut, I have to credit that to the system. My system really helped me play better. Lefty, righty, whichever, two hands, both sides. My system, once I really started watching guys like Agassi and Fed and really understanding what they're doing and going, wow, this is based on science. It's not what I see, it's what I don't see. And I started to realize, there's way more to this game than I thought. I became less afraid of my groundies. Now I love to sit in the back and wail. When I was a kid in college and high school, I didn't like my game. I was a chipper and charger, probably more for the people watching your podcast now. I didn't love my groundies. I couldn't wail on them. So what I did was I had a pretty good return to serve and I'd get to net. Yeah. And then I'd play net and then scurry around and then I'd serve and volley. So I was really up to net a lot and I had quick hands, quick feet. So I just played like an athlete, where today I just love whining and just, I love hitting the ball now. So I much prefer singles now. So yeah, it went ass backwards for me. It really did.
That's
yeah.
Really funny. So then you're at UC San Diego and you graduate and you get into coaching immediately after, or is there some transition period?
Pretty immediately. Yeah. I mean, I played a few tournaments after. I'm actually going to starting again right now, play men's 65s. What the heck? I'm in pretty good shape now. It could be my heyday. You never know. But, and I'm serving bigger. I'm actually playing way better than I ever did in college. Yeah. Way better. I mean, not even close, not even close. So yeah, back in those days, I actually did pretty well in doubles. Mm-hmm. So this would have been the perfect podcast for me 40 years ago, because I was kind of a doubles, that was my thing. Billy and I, we did real well. We got All-American. We got to the quarters of our NCAA. And I just love doubles. We were number one on the team. I played 3 or 4 singles, but we always played number one doubles. So double, and my partner was 3. He and I switched 3 or 4, and the other 2 number 1 and 2 guys, we were much better at them at doubles. Yeah. We were really into doubles. But like I said, it was really, I wouldn't say I was the prettiest player. Like I said, I would really block and charge. Yeah. And so everything was strategy back then. Strategy and quick hands and a kick serve. Right. That was my life. But I sure enjoy playing tennis more today.
Yeah. Well,
than I did then.
That's a good game for doubles. If you're gonna pick a game for doubles, I'd say blocking it, getting to the net, good return.
Yeah.
That works.
I guess it depends what level, right? I mean, I guess 3.5, 3.0. There's a lot of 2 up, 2 back, or 4 back,
Sure,
2 back,
sure,
2 back.
Yeah.
So, but when I was playing college tennis, it was always pretty much the same. Everyone lined up the same. You're returning serve. Your net player would be at the service line towards the middle of the court, and you'd be on the, back of the baseline, and you return and you try to get to net. So you always wanted 2 up. Right? When you play that kind of, when you play, let's say 5-0 and up.
Yeah.
I guess even 4. Yeah. It's pretty much the guys that take over the net are the ones that win the points.
Right. Exactly. So, and then now you're in San Diego still, right?
No, we're in Dana Point now. We moved up. We're in the midst of a move. We're building a home and all this stuff. So we sold our home during COVID. And it's a pretty good time to sell. So we thought, let's do that. And yeah. So we got lucky then. And now we're in the midst of building a new home in the mountains. So for the first time, I'll be leaving California pretty much in like 4 decades. More. So yeah. So I'm here temporarily.
You said?
We're in Dana Point, which is Orange County.
Okay.
Down the street from Newport Beach.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
Where are you coaching there? Do you have like some?
Got a couple places I'm working at. I mean, I got a couple of courts right here I work at. A lot of my students have always had private courts. Like, I work with Warren Wood. He's a nice player. He won the NCAAs a few years ago. And Steve Foreman. They all have private courts. So I use a lot of those. I do work at a club here and there. Like tomorrow, I'm going to a Lifetime club. But I stay away from the clubs for the most part right now. And I'm not a club pro at the moment. And I don't think I'll ever will be again. The politics is okay when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s. But as you get older, you just want to you just want to coach your peeps and you really don't want to go through everything you have to go through, handing the club money and dealing with, the club tournaments, and you can't teach this weekend because, so my kids are all serious. Most of my players are serious. Like I think I told you, I got guys in from the East Coast right now.
Yeah.
So a lot of that. So I want private courts. I want to be able to work all day if I want, or whenever I want.
Right, on your own terms.
So that's pretty much what I'm doing now. I think a lot of coaches do that as well because, the club situation, you're not just a tennis pro, you're kind of a politician, and that's just not for me anymore.
So I want to dive into a little bit of double strategy before we get into technique, but real briefly, I know you used to coach, I guess when they were juniors, Sam Query, Steve Johnson, a few others, Coco Vandeweghe maybe?
Yeah, Abby Spears. She's a great doubles player. If you know Abby Spears, I think she got as high as 4 in the world. Mm-hmm. I worked with her. All those guys. And then Stevie Johnson played with another boy I worked with, Steve Foreman, whose court I'll use occasionally. And they won a lot of gold balls together, right? They won the boys 14 hard courts and a bunch of, big tournaments together. So, I worked with some great players, singles and doubles.
Did you feel like at that age you could see that they were going to make it, or that they had at least had a good shot to? No,
you don't really think about that stuff. I didn't. Yeah. It was all about college, honestly. It was all about college. Let's get a full ride someplace. Let's get on the team and let's see what we can do in the NCAAs. And you just try not to think that far in advance because anything can happen.
Right.
I know that. Right. Life can just, throw you curveballs. So you try not to think that far in advance. I mean, sure, I knew Sam and Stevie and Foreman and all those guys. They were getting to the finals of the Easter Bowl or the finals of the back draw of the Orange Bowl or 4th round of the Orange Bowl. And I thought, maybe someday it could be. Yeah. But you sure didn't count on it, and you sure didn't dwell on it, and you didn't talk about it. That's for sure. You never talked about pro. That was really putting the cart before the horse. It was all about college.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let's dive into a little bit of double strategy.
Sure.
It sounds like you're not coaching a lot of like club level players. It's mostly higher level right now.
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. No. I have in the past, but not at the moment.
So in the past, when you have, what are some of the common mistakes you see? Let's say like 3-5, 4-0 level. On the doubles court as far as strategy goes?
Well, I mean, there's your typical ones, right? So the volleyer goes across and tries to make a play, and then they both end up on the same side of the court. That's the typical one. Or players trying to hit too big of a first serve, which is a big waste of time, really, when you really want to give your net man a chance at a poach. So it's really more about kicking the serve deep and getting a lot of first serves in. Yeah. So a lot of people just try to wail, even club players will try to wail on the first serve, and then they tap the second one in, and their poor partner has to, take bullets. So you really want to find that 3/4 speed, I think, on the serve. That's really important, and be able to place it, so your partner can give you the signal behind his back, 1, go down the tee, 2, go wide. And if you have enough control, it's better to have control, I think, on the serve, because then the net man kind of knows what to do. Oh, he's going to the backhand, so I'll veer out, but I'll watch my alley. Yeah, that type of thing, But if you know what your partner's going to do behind you, you have a much better chance of just performing well if you know what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to illustrate that point. So for the listeners, making a high percentage of first serves in doubles, even more so than singles, is so important.
And spin. A flat serve is a waste.
Yeah. I mean, and typically, if you're hitting your flat serve, you're not going to make 70% like you need to, at least.
And if you want to come to net, you'll never get past. You'll be 5 feet from the service line. But if the ball rises and falls, you might get to the service line on the first volley.
Sure. Yeah. And so last week I was watching one of my 9-0 mixed teams that I'm on. I wasn't playing this match, And one of our teams was playing against this college kid, and he had this huge first serve, and he just kept trying to wail at it and wail at it. I kept track for the first set and then quit keeping track. But in the first set, he made 3 first serves in the whole set. I think he served 3 times.
So that's like 25% first serves.
Yeah, it was about 25%. And of course,
that's not good.
Partners were able to step in on the second serve, and then his net player just had to hug the alley and was totally out of the point. So I see it so often at these USTA tournaments that I go to, where a player, especially at the 3-5 or 4 level, these guys will step up and just try to whack these serves, and they just keep missing. So it's really important. I want to just highlight that. Make sure you get a high first serve percentage.
Yeah. Like my partner and I would always say to one another, "Hey man, just spin it in. Just spin it in."
Yep.
You know.
Absolutely. So that's really important for serve strategy. How do you think about return strategy in doubles?
Really depends who you're playing, right? If you're playing a guy who serves and volleys, the big point is you want to return, topspin at their feet so they pop the volley up. So your partner can then come from the service line towards the center of the court and just pick off volleys wherever he can. So that was kind of our strategy. We would call it number 53. I don't know why we picked 53 in college, but Billy he goes 53, man, because we play serve and volleyers. And then I try to really come up on the ball, brush it, put it right down at their feet. And then Billy would just go right to the center of the court, almost to the center net strap. And he'd just pick off whatever would be popped up. He'd just pick it off. Yeah. So I think, that's what you do with that kind of a player. Now, if they're going to serve and stay back, sure makes life a lot easier. Everything works then. You can just return short, you can return deep, you can hit the lob, you can come in behind your chip. So it really depends who you're playing. When he's talking about 3.0 players, I guess a lot of them aren't going to serve and volley. So it's a whole different strategy. Then it's, I hate to say this on a podcast, on a doubles podcast, I really hate to say this, but it really, hit a better ball. If you hit a better ball, you're going to be a better doubles player, singles player, triples player. If you hit a better ball, you're going to be a better player. And so my theory is don't give up on hitting a better ball either. Yeah. Don't just, if you just strategize yourself to death, then you're going to sort of pigeonhole yourself. Okay, well, I don't serve and volley, so I'm just going to serve and stay back and just hit deep until somebody misses, or, hit deep until my partner runs across and tries to poach one eventually. I think if you hit a better ball, now all of a sudden you can hit it right at the net, man. You can hit a nice inside out cross court. Then you got those 2 shots. They're afraid because you hit a big ball. Then you can hit almost a drop shot return. The game is opened up so much to you if you hit a better ball. So that's my thing. I guess that's why I got into technique, because I really didn't enjoy my tennis in college other than the doubles. I love doubles in college. But when you're a singles player, it always reminds me of that guy. What's his name? Taylor Dent. Yeah. I couldn't stand watching him because all he did was chip and charge, return a serve, chip and charge. He just didn't have the pretty groundies to stay in the backcourt with anybody. So he was always, block the return, come in. And I didn't want to be that guy anymore. I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to be able to tee off. And I think it even helps in doubles. I think if you can tee off, if you have a crisp volley and you don't have to, how most people volley short and then all they work on is their angle volley. Boy, if you have a nice deep, if you can hit a backhand volley down the line, that's an incredible shot to have. Yeah. But I just find so many players, they don't develop their volley. And so all they ever try to do is just hit these cheesy little angle volleys. And they feel good about themselves, but it's only because that's the only volley they can hit. I think it's better to have a good volley that you can do more on. And then you're no longer playing 3.5. Now you're playing 4.5. That's my theory because those lower levels, it's tough to have that much fun.
Well, yeah, that makes tons of sense. And there's a few kind of points I want to pull from that. One is just knowing where you're limited. So what I'll tell a lot of people is there's a few things you can work on when you want to improve in tennis. You can work on your technique, which is what you're talking about. You can work on your strategy. You can work on your fitness. If you're gassed after the first set,
that's true.
You need to get in better shape. And then a fourth one might be mental. Work on how you perform under pressure, things like that. And it is the case for most players around 3-0, 3-5, even 4-0. And then once you get to 4-5, 5-0, it kind of switches. But it is the case at that 3-0 to 4-0 level where they really should spend a lot of time on technique.
I agree. Because when you're go ahead.
Well, they've got to add more tools to their toolkit, essentially. So like you're saying, if you're able to hit a high, deep, heavy ball, and then on the next one, hit a short drop shot, that's two tools that you have. But if you don't have that with both your forehand and your backhand, then, you're going to be a lot more limited. And then once you start to add all these tools, then you can work on strategy, when to use each shot, where to place the ball, things like that.
When you talk about the other three, right? Strategy, fitness, and mental, I really feel like those three are much more for players that are 4.5 and above. Right? So you got to really get to that level. You really want to get to where, okay, my physicality is going to make a difference. I don't know at a lower level if the physicality makes that big of a difference. That's why I'll be excited when we talk about technique, because what I'd like to do is help whoever's listening, and especially if they're 2-5s or 3-0s or 3-5s, to hit a better volley. And I can give them some things they've probably never heard before, like the 45, which we've talked about in the past. Little things like that all of a sudden, it's like, well, I don't have to worry about missing anymore. When you stop worrying about missing, then you can elevate your game. But if all you're worried about is getting that little ball into that court over there, then you're sort of really limited as to any kind of strategy. I mean, I could give my partner the 1 or the 2 behind my back, right? But if he can't aim his serve, what good are my fingers? What good's my strategy? So there's so much of the game that opens up to you when you can place the ball, when you can hit slice versus topspin or flatten it out. You know what I mean? There's so many more strategies and so much more opens to you when you're not just worried about hitting the ball into the court.
Right. So. Absolutely. So let's dive into it. So let's talk about. Let's start high level. What are the most common issues you see with technique? Let's set aside the serve and return for now. We'll get to that later. Okay. So we'll start with ground strokes. What are the most common mistakes you see technically with the forehand and backhand ground stroke for we'll call it a 3-5 player?
Perfect. The tail wags the dog.
What is that?
That's the problem I see. Well, on a 3-5 player, the first thing they do is get their racket back. But if you watch the players, you should leave your racket forward and turn your lower body. See that? Now you're in balance. But when you take your racket back and turn, you're back heavy, right? Everything's falling away. Now you're having to catch your balance the rest of the stroke through because you've thrown yourself off balance. So on the backhand, if they leave their Here, hold on. Am I allowed to do this on a podcast? I don't know.
Yes. So for anybody listening, what we're going to do is include the YouTube video in the show notes. So you can go to thetennistribe.com/podcast and you can find this here. But so talk us through it.
Like on the forehand, if you lay the head back, that's the tail wagging the dog. But if you leave the head forward and let the butt of the racket come back, now you have to move your body. And so your body is moving your arm. And same with the backhand. Everyone's taught, they even teach it to point the butt cap at the ball. I've actually heard coaches teach that. But that means, where's the coil? It's the opposite of a coil. So what you really want to do is pull the butt cap back, leaving the head forward. And now you're really now you have to use your body. And then when you come through, your arm ripples from concave to convex like this. And so you get a much nicer hit. And on the volleys, I might as well keep going. On the volleys, it's always taught linear. That's the word, linear, right? Step and push the racket forward. Well, that's not what Federer does. That's not what Hennon did. There's not that many good volleyers, so I can't really point at a lot of players. That's not what Sampras did or the Bryan brothers. In fact, if Sampras and Federer they'd step back a lot, and then they'd line up this 45-degree angle. So it's really not a back to forward hit like that. It's really this angle out to the 45 that you really can't miss on. Once you understand those two angles at the 45, it saves your volley. So just those 2 points alone would take a 3.0 or a 3.5 player, and boom, you're a 4.0 right now. Just those two things. If they would just turn to the 45 and stretch out to the 45 and forget stepping. You don't have to step on a volley. I mean, Federer, half the time he steps backwards. He hardly ever steps forward. And then the same with the forehand. If you find that angle on the forehand and stay there, right? Don't come forward. Just stay right there. It's magic the way the ball just pops. And so I'd say between the tail wag, I mean, on both cases, it's the tail wagging the dog. So you really want everything to be a body shot. Right? You really don't want the arm. Once the arm is involved, that means your little muscles are ruling the day. And if your little muscles like your arm and your elbow are ruling the day, that's choke city. You want your bigger muscles like your core. You want that to hit the ball, whether it's a volley or a groundie or a serve. It better be coming from the core, or you're not going to do very well under pressure.
So it sounds like they're on the ground strokes anyways. A lot of people are making the mistake of taking their arm back first, keeping their chest kind of towards the net forward.
Right.
Is that right? And then
that's right.
Hitting with their arm. Or do they ever rotate their chest? Do they rotate a little bit after?
Sure they do, but the thing is, it's not really a unit turn, right? Because my hips and chest don't have to move together. I can move my lower body, and then eventually the upper body comes, and then I do my lower body. So the chest follows the lower body, the hips, right? So it's the hips that move first. And then think about it. If you look at me and I turn my lower body, see how the head curves in? It counterbalances, it creates a coil.
Yeah.
And that coil is a much better, I mean, like I said, if you have a coil in your stroke, you're already a 4.5 or a 4.0 instantly. And it's really the 3-5 players that have no coil. They kind of play like pickleball, right? They just try to hit the ball, and they think, well, my arm needs to move, but it's a real optical illusion with these good players, right? I mean, a guy like Nadal, he's here. His racket doesn't move that much. It's really his inner body that moves in this figure eight that I will talk about in the system. Right. And his arm moves off of it, but it's not like he ever actually moves his arm. It's a cause and effect thing, right? It's the hips that actually move the arm, and then pow.
It's kind of like energy coming from the core and kind of extending through the arm. Is that think about how a slinky goes down the stairs, right? The bottom of it comes, the middle comes, and then the rest of it comes down, and then the middle comes and the rest of it comes down. So it's like a slinky moving down the stairs, right? The top part doesn't just flop over. It's the bottom part that pulls it. And it's the same here. Your hips pull your arm, and your arm kind of lags once again. So you're wagging the tail, right? The hips move the arm as opposed from the arm just moving independently. Got it.
So those would be the two biggies, I think, volleys and groundies.
So let's talk more about volleys. So you say make contact at the 45, and I want to make sure that's clear to the listeners. So if they can imagine, let's say they're standing on the service line right in the middle of the court, the 45-degree angle would be from their feet towards the net post, essentially.
Correct. Like if I'm facing you, my backhand volley is right there, and my forehand volley is right there.
Right.
And then there's one big thing also that I think kills people, and listen up, folks, because this will help you quickly, very quickly, is the idea of punching forward. See, it's a linear straight line. You watch the good players, their arm is like a wing like this. So if you can round it out and make your racket, try to make your racket from the tip of your racket to your chest, make that all round like a wing, the ball will pop off your strings on both forehand and backhand, where the head is slightly laid back. right? You don't want the head and see, the thing is, when they say step and punch, you don't want the head of the racket and the wrist and the hand, moving together. You really want the hand in front of the head. The head is laid back. So if you can make your racket, if you can round it out somehow on both sides, your volleys will pop instead of like a thud. Most lower level volleyers, the ball doesn't come off the string like a pop. But if you can round out your arm, because round is stronger than straight. That's why they build cathedrals with round arches, right? Yeah. It's not just straight like when they build a crappy house. When they build a beautiful cathedral, it's always big arches. So if you can create that arch with your arm and the rest of your body too, but even just your arm, your volleys will pop. So that's kind of a big technical thing that can raise your level of doubles.
Sure. And then I see a lot of players who have the wrong grip on the volley. It's a continental grip.
Oh, well, you got to have a continental grip. You got to have a continental grip. And forget the two-handed backhand volley, lady. If you're doing this, life's going to be rough. That continental grip, you really have to have a one-hander on both sides.
Yeah, it's obvious, but I wanted to mention it because it astonishes me. Even at the 4-0 level, sometimes I'll see some players who kind of have a pancake grip up at the net, and it's what they're comfortable with, and maybe it wins them matches at certain levels. But
at a certain level,
really dedicated to improving, you've got to get this stuff right. You
got to have a continental grip. That's the most important grip in doubles, I think, because serve, slice serve, kick serve, flat serve, all continental works. Then come to net, overhead volleys, continental grip. So, if you don't have the continental grip mastered, doubles might not be your thing.
So another thing I always see these club level players do, and I still do this myself sometimes, is they'll be at the net and they'll have a ball hit at them pretty hard, and the volley just pops up in the air. It doesn't go through the court. What mistake are they making there? Are they kind of
stepping with the wrong? They're stepping with the wrong foot. If you hit the ball at me, let's say you hit the ball at me, and let's see if this will work here. So let's say you hit the ball right at me, and you're the net. If I step back, look at that. I'm right at the 45, and I take my body out of the way. See, my body, it's coming right at me. So here I am. I step back, and it's lined up. Think about Federer, how he always does that, right? He splits and he steps back. And same with the forehand, splits and steps back. But most people will step with the front foot, and then they're still like this with this weak position.
Okay.
And if all they did was
jammed.
Right. But if all they did was step with the back foot, look how a ball at me becomes a perfectly lined up ball. Perfectly lined up. So they step with the wrong foot, and that's a big, big faux pas. So even with you, I don't believe you do that, but I'm sure you step with the back.
I do sometimes, for sure. So that's on ball coming right at the player, right? You're stepping backwards to get your body out of the way, so that you can still make contact out at this 45-degree angle on either side. If the ball's a little bit further off, you can still step forward with that front.
And you can step forward. That's right. But just to teach that, step forward on every volley. That's insane, because if you watch Federer, he's always stepping back. Yeah. That's one of the prettiest things about Rogers, the way he steps back and lines himself up beautifully. That's part of the artistry, I think, that people don't recognize what it is, but they go, oh, he's so pretty, he's so effortless. It's that step back that makes him look so pretty.
So what drills can we do to practice these volleys other than just having someone feed at us?
Well,
anything we can do with a wall or with a practice partner?
Yeah. Hit inside out volleys. Learn to hit your volley to get that round arm and to almost like an inside out ground stroke, but learn to hit the volleys inside out wide, because then you'll start to go, oh, look at that ball pop off my strings. And then you'll start to understand, oh, round is stronger than straight. And then, so I like to volley inside out. I'll have my players, I'll hit balls at them and have them volley right into the fence, just so they can see how the ball pops off their strings quickly.
Okay. So
And I also like bump up and across. Have you ever done bump up and across?
I think you have a YouTube video on it that I've seen before. I'll see if I can find it and link in the show notes, but go ahead and describe it.
Yeah, well, bump up and across is when you hit me the ball. Let's say we're doing quick volleys, but before we start doing quick volleys, my players and I, we always do bump up and across, which means you hit me the ball and you're at net and I'm at net. So I go to the 45, I deaden the ball, so where the ball hits and goes straight up in the air, and then I volley across to you. And then you do the same thing, kind of bump it up and then across to me. That's a really good drill to find your optimal hitting point, which is the 45. And you'll notice if you try to bump up and you reach forward, it'll go into the net. And if you turn too far to the side, it'll go behind you. But if you go right to the 45, it'll bump straight up in the air, and then you can bump it across to the other player. That's a fantastic drill, and I don't think people do that one enough. But that's a great drill as well for volleys.
Okay. So to be clear, so if you and I are doing that, I'm making contact twice. So you're hitting it to me, I'm bumping it up to myself, and then I'm volleying it to you. Then you bump it up to yourself, and then you volley it back to me. Okay.
Yeah, you do that for 2 or 3 minutes, and then your contact point, you have it wired. You really feel it.
Got it. Okay, so I'll find that YouTube video and link to it in the show notes for the listeners.
I'm happy to get it to you as well. So.
Perfect. And then it sounds like volleying inside out might be helpful. So maybe if we're working on backhand volleys, we both stand in the deuce court and we volley backhand to backhand inside out. Maybe address
That's right.
that.
That's right, or feeding or a ball machine. But the idea is to make your arm like a wing, like a bird's wing, rather than anything that's bent or straight. You want to be right in the middle of those two.
Got it.
I think, yeah, like I said, Hennon and Federer and Sampras, some of the best volleyers in the world, they have that beautiful, once again, one of the other things people just, Federer is so beautiful. He has that beautiful wing when he makes the volley, right? He's not linear. He just lets it bounce off his strings. And the thing is, when you have that roundness, your head is laid back the appropriate amount. So when the ball hits your strings, you end up pressing more air into the ball because it has a broader piece of the ball, and the strings end up laying back more. So between those two things happening, more air being pressed into the ball and the strings coming back a little more, the ball has this magical pop that you don't get on a linear stroke.
Right. So how should we be thinking about our racket head during all of this?
Funny you should ask.
Have our strings open, strings forward?
Funny you should ask. I have a new invention. You want to see it? I don't think you've seen it.
Okay, let's take a look.
Okay. I call it the Cobra.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
Talk us through it. No, I haven't.
So you see here, you've got a racket grip. This is modeled after my Clash grip. So we 3D printed these. So before we make a mold, we like to 3D print things. So this is modeled after my grip. So it's a nice 4.5 grip, and it's the perfect size. And this is right at the sweet spot. Where this stick is, this is right at just above the middle. So it's right at the sweet spot of the average racket. And that's a great question you asked. You want to make it so it's round. You see how I have to, in order to hit the ball, I have to make this facing you. So that means I have to look at my arm now. It becomes this wing. See that? So I have to make it, I have to round out my arm, and my head lays back slightly just to make it perfect. Because if I come at it like a regular person, I'm going to miss every ball. So it teaches you to treat the racket as if it's round. So I made a round racket because you want to hit the ball with the convex side. So you wouldn't want to hit it with this side, but you want to hit it with this side, right? Because you start coiled up like this, coiled up. And then as you come out, you go from coiled, from concave. See that concave? That's a coil. And as your hips pull you out, you go to convex. Well, this comes convex for you. So you start to realize, I have to lay my wrist back just the right amount so it hits this sweet spot. And then when you get a racket in your hand, oh my God, it's just perfect. So this is called the Cobra. and because it looks kind of like a Cobra. And so I like to think of the racket, try to make the racket round, not flat. So that's how I think of it. And this product is really neat. The players all tell me, all my guys say, when I hit with this thing for 5 minutes, put the racket in your hand, you find the sweet spot every time.
Okay.
I'm into this right now. I'm into it.
So I was going to try to describe what it looks like, but I don't think I'd do a very good job. So I'm going to get a picture of that from you and a link to it.
Sure.
We'll include that in the show notes as well, if anybody wants to check it out. So another question I had was the height of the volleys. So a lot of the time when we're playing a doubles match, especially, the opponents will try to dip a ball, down at our feet. How should we be thinking about that? Especially, some of us, I'm not old, but I'm getting older. My knees are starting to hurt. I don't like to bend my knees as much as I used to, like all the coaches tell me to do. How should we think about hitting these lower volleys that are down by our ankles or our...
I mean, a lot of guys didn't bend their knees. I mean, McEnroe never bent his knees on volleys, right? But he had that convexity, and the continental grip is really important. If you have a continental grip, then of course your racket face is always angled in an upward position on the volleys. So when you have a continental grip, that's half the battle. And now if you round it out, that's the other half. Mm-hmm. Remember how McEnroe would stiff leg those low volleys, but he had that continental grip and he had that nice round arm like this as he popped out to the ball. And so I think the combination, once again, of the continental grip and rounding out your arm, making it convex, making the racket convex at contact, you really don't need to bend your knees that much. A lot of the great volleyers don't bend their knees. They really don't. I mean, McEnroe is one of them. I would say Mac had a great volley, and he really never got low for his volleys. It must have discouraged a lot of teaching pros in that time, because he almost jumped up on his pickups and volleys. He would almost come up off the ground, remember? Or maybe you don't, you're too young.
I didn't watch a lot of him, but I do. That sounds familiar because I feel like I do that a lot. If I'm serving and volleying and somebody blasts a return at my feet, I'll just go stiff-legged and just dig it out with my racket.
Sure, and if you have that nice angle on the face of your racket and your arm's nice and taut, it's not bent or it's not straight, but if it's nice and taut and round, sure, those are some of your best volleys, I bet, especially going inside out.
Right. Yeah, it is. When I time it right, people are usually pretty impressed with it. If I hadn't been playing as much, then sometimes I'll miss.
I think people volley better. Guys like you and I think all of us volley better. Even though we try to go cross court a lot, we all seem to volley better when we volley inside out down the line because the ball goes deeper. I always found in the juniors when I went cross court, they started getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And you really don't want a short volley. I mean, if that's all you've got, they're pretty readable.
Yeah.
You should be able to volley, deep or short.
That's interesting. So one common thing, you keep talking about having the racket convex. So it sounds like on all of these volleys, we kind of want our grip a little bit in front of the racket head. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So the hand's a little bit out in front.
Yeah.
And
nobody knows the thing is, nobody knows what that little bit is, right? A little bit to Federer is a little different than a little bit to some 3.0 lady. Sure. So that's kind of why I had to come up with this Cobra, because that shows you what the little bit is.
Yeah. It gets you the right feel for it.
Right.
So let's talk next about... I want to ask, how have so this is a pretty unique teaching system, and I've seen how effective it is. And you're certifying coaches all over the country now who are learning your system.
We got one in Australia now and one in Canada. So trying to get around the world, but yep.
Okay. All over the world. How have your coaching methods changed over the last, say, 10 or 20 years?
Not much, 10 or 20. Not much at all. I've been into this for about 2.5 decades. I mean,
Okay.
I wrote a book in '96 when I was working with all those top players we talked about in the beginning, because I thought, well, I might as well capitalize. I got some good players. Let's make a little money. I wrote a book, got it published. I don't even look at that book anymore. I don't teach the same way. Starting in 1998, I've taught one way only, this nonlinear thing. So I wrote this book in '96. When people ask me to sign it, I ask them if they just burn it instead. I don't like the way I used to teach, because all I did for my book was get every great tip I've ever learned and put it into a book. So that's not much of a system. It's just a bunch of tips, unit turn, buggy whip, sides, windshield wiper, punch, block, whatever everybody said, karaoke. I said what they said, but I got it into one format. So I hate that book now because it reminds me of what I used to do. But no, the last 20, 25 years, I'm just honing my system. So I think I teach my system better now than I did in 1998, but it's still the same idea of the core initiating every stroke, which made more sense to me. Right. Rather than, do this because I say so. My system is based on a standing wave. I don't know if you know that. Like if you hold a rope and I hold a rope and I move my rope, it creates the curve, right? If I move it faster, it creates two curves. You know how they use those ropes now in exercise, where they have those heavy ropes and they lift
the weight.
Right.
Kind of
right. So that's right. That's nonlinear weight training. That is more along the lines of my system. So I think over the years, I've really honed my system down more. But no, I don't teach differently than I did 20 years ago. I'm really into this idea of nonlinear tennis. So I won't just jump out of it and go, just do a buggy whip. And there's a place for all this stuff, the buggy whip and everything else. But why? You don't just do it to do it. It's not, you don't just think of the end result. Why the buggy whip? Well, you started in a coil, the ball rose high on you, you still want to hit top spin. So you don't want to pass the 45, so you have to do a buggy whip. So like I said, most of these tips are pretty good. They're just not complete. And what I like about the system is it really shows you, it educates you as to, well, here's what it completes, here's what a ball throw looks like. See how the pitcher coils inside of his hand. And then as he uncoils, his arm lays way back and then he releases, I'd rather people be educated than just give them a tip. Because, tips don't last long. They didn't for me. I mean, I'd hear it would work for a while and then it wouldn't work for a while. I forget it. Or you hear a new one. But if you really understand how the body best moves, whether you're an ice skater or a tennis player or a baseball player, if you understand how the body moves, well, then it's no longer a tip. You really get a deep consciousness, what you're doing. And I think that lasts forever.
Yeah, it's more of a foundational kind of framework. For everything else. And you talk, I think in the serve course that we put out several years back, you had the player throw, I think, a baseball or softball with you at the beginning of the lesson, right?
Sure. I had to teach the guy how to throw, because a lot of pros will say, well, it's just like throwing a ball. But unless you know how to throw a ball, that doesn't really help you either. So, I taught him how to throw the ball first in a nice way.
Right.
And then natural.
And then a few weeks later, I saw a YouTube video of Djokovic warming up. And before he even starts to practice, he has a baseball glove and I think a softball in his bag, and he starts throwing. Before he even swings a tennis racket, he does this.
I got a hard ball and a mitt in my bag as well. And my first gift for Christmas for any of my players I'm working with at the time is a mitt. Because I'm like, hey, you should have a mitt here. You should have a jump rope and a few other things, but you got to have a mitt because, if you're going to throw, if you're going to serve, you got to want to get that natural flow. So just throwing a ball is a great idea. And I saw YouTube too on Nadal, and this was back when Nadal was about 21. and they were trying to beef up his serve. Remember, he didn't have a big serve when he came out. And it was the same thing. They just had him throwing a ball until he could throw it over the fence on the other side of the court. And, so they didn't really teach him much. They just said, here, keep throwing until you can throw it further. Yeah. So the ball throw really is, let's face it, the ball throw is pretty much the movement of any natural athlete. If you can throw a ball, you can play golf. If you can throw a ball, you can play tennis. Throwing a ball is a big deal.
Right. So I wanted to transition to some rapid fire questions, and then we can kind of close out here. It sounds like your least favorite tennis book might be your own.
Yeah, it is. It is.
What is your favorite tennis book?
Oh, gosh. My favorite tennis books, the ones that really left an impression, weren't tennis books. I met with Dick Gould when I was a young guy and he was younger. And at Stanford, he was a great tennis coach at Stanford. You must be familiar with him.
Yeah, he has a bunch of.
He had a lot of big. But he would have everybody on his team read this book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And it was a very interesting book. It was about a doctor wrote it. He was a plastic surgeon. And he would say how he would have a woman come in, a client, who had a funny looking nose of some sort. I don't remember the book exactly, but I do remember this part. And she was quiet and had no confidence and shy and this and that. And he fixed her nose. And he said she was a completely different person. She was outgoing. She was funny. And her personality, everything really came through. And I found that psychologically to be a very interesting book. I guess it was like an inner game, but I always found the inner game a little fluffy for me, a little too hippy-dippy. But I found this Psycho-Cybernetics by this doctor. I found that fascinating. And I guess another book I liked a lot was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And it was a very interesting book about paying attention and quietude. And so those were my big psychological tennis books. I guess the only one I really remember was The Art of Singles and The Art of Doubles by Tony Traber. I'm old. So those were the ones I read. The ones I didn't like particularly, I didn't really like Winning Ugly because it's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to teach people to be beautiful players, not get to the court early and warm up and then go home and shower and then come and pretend you haven't played and say after 5 minutes, okay, let's play set because you warmed up for an hour and took a shower. And, so to me, that's all gamesmanship bullcrap. And I don't like that. Kind of like I love Federer, but I was not a McEnroe fan. I like the beauty. I love the artistry of Federer. And McEnroe, he just did things to win. So, to me, the game has certainly become way more than winning. I want to feel good about myself. I want to feel good about the match I played today and how I won it or how I lost it. It's more how I play than what the score is. So I guess my least favorite would be Winning Ugly now, and my most favorite is the new book I wrote, the 3 core fundamentals of the game, talking about the coiling and the 45 and all that. Because tennis, as I reach my mid-60s here, tennis is just way more than bragging rights. It's just way more than that. It's about having real fun and being satisfied and joyful about the way you play, and not just go, I won 4-4, but I just chipped every backhand. I was afraid to hit my backhand, and I just rushed the net, and I made these 2 bad line calls, and I won the match. It's just not about that anymore. And it was more about that when I was a kid. Yeah, it was more like that about that when I was a kid. I was immature, and it was just about the win, the bragging rights. So I don't know. Keep firing away.
So we'll link to those favorites in the show notes. What is your favorite tennis tournament to attend?
Gosh, I guess it would. Well, the Orange Bowl of the juniors was always fun to go to. That was really exciting. But I guess my favorite of the tournaments has probably got to be the French because, and my least favorite is grass because the grass is just so weird. I've played on grass. When it's nice in the first rounds, it's nice, but everyone's hurting themselves. They're slipping, like Serena slipped, Djokovic slipped, everyone slips. And it's so perfect that you slide a lot and the ball skids a lot. And in the end of the tournament, it's all chopped up. So that has problems too, because it hits the baseline and it takes a funny bounce. And for some of the serve and volleyer players, it'll hit the midcourt and it'll take a funny bounce because it turns into dirt. It goes from grass to dirt. So to me, it's just not a true surface. I really love the clay because you get to see the baseline, or you get these long points, and that's what I like. I mean, this year's Wimbledon was so boring next to the French. The French was just so amazing. That Djokovic Nadal match in the semis was so amazing. And then they followed it up with an incredible finals where I almost forgot about Wimbledon. There was just nothing to it. The average rally was 5-6 balls. And in French, the average rally is like 20. So, I just much prefer the French.
Who is your favorite player you've ever coached?
Ever coached? Yeah, it's hard. I don't want to say that in a podcast because
you say a few. Name a few of them, maybe.
Sam was a good listener. I gave him a few lessons, and I worked with him a lot of clinics. He came to my summer camps, but he was a good listener. Eric Riley, who got to the finals, I think he won the Orange Bowl doubles. He won the Orange Bowl. He's only 5'6", but he won the boys 18s, which is incredible. He was a really good listener, and he and I did other things together. We did yoga together. I taught him how to meditate, visualize, and he was really open to all that. Warren Wood, who I'm still working with a little now, he's went back on tour. He's going to look for his name. He won the NCAAs 5 years ago, and then started teaching in LA, and then about 2 months ago calls me on the phone and says, "Hey man, I'm going back on the circuit. I'm going to Africa. I'm going to go get some points." And he's a beautiful player, and he's another great listener. I guess the great listeners are fun to work with. I like Steve Foreman a lot. He was a great kid, and I worked with him a lot. Just a great guy. And his sister Karen was funny, and she played full ride for Wake Forest. She was a really funny girl, so we had fun. So I don't know. I can't really say a favorite, but
sounds
like
a lot of the great listeners is who you really enjoyed.
Well, yeah, because they let me spout off, and they let me create the system. By them listening, and they would talk back to me. Like Eric would say things like, "Oh, on my volleys, because he has the best volleys, right? And 5'6", he won the Orange Bowl. Think about that."
Yeah.
So he would always, I say, "Boy, Eric, you never miss a volley." He goes, "Well, I have this imaginary line that goes from the butt of my racket to my belly button. And no matter what, I never let my racket move unless that line moves together." He says, "I either move the whole unit to the forehand or the backhand." And he says, "I always stay lined up that way." So he actually helped me in my teaching. And I was, and I'm a big proponent of playing left-handed. So I was working on my own left-handed serve. And Warren, he said, "Oh, Jack, you're trying to be concave at contact." He says, "I'm watching you." He says, "You should let your racket lay back and be convex at contact." So my kids helped me. So, I think the ones who engage with me are my favorites because, like minds. Yeah, like minds. We have our own little language, and it's fun to talk with those kids.
So tell us a tennis story that you've never told anyone.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Okay. I got a weird one. It was a big tournament in San Diego, like a level 1 or 2. It was a good tournament. It was a level 1 or 2. And it was this boy I was coaching. I haven't even mentioned him, Tongol. He was a Chinese boy, and his name was Tongol. And he played a match, and he won the match in 3 sets. And he's walking to the parking lot with his father, right? Boys, this is, I think it was boys 14, maybe first year 16s, but I don't think so. I think it was last year, the 14s. And I never could believe this actually happened. But the boy and the parent and an umpire followed him to the car. And they said at 5-3, son, you mixed up the score. The kid convinced the umpire. So he had to go back and replay the match, and he ended up losing. Oh. I never told that story. I hate that story. So I never told that story before. And I never heard of anything so ridiculous in my life.
Have you, were you on the court and you knew that they didn't mix up the score, or do you?
No, I think I had already left, and I found out later. I had already left. I guess that's one of my least favorite stories. I couldn't believe it happened. I couldn't believe it. And then I guess my favorite story was this kid, Eric Riley, same place, different tournament, big tournament. It was the boys 14s again, different guy. He and Tonga were the same age. And he was playing Jonathan Lowe in the finals. And he and I were going short court before the finals. And we were really connected. And he and I were talking. Oh, yeah, I never told this story. So he and I were talking about death. Eric was a trippy, heavy kid for a 14-year-old. He goes, Jack, have you ever thought about dying? I said, well, I try not to think about it, Eric. And remember, we're going short court. We're going two hands on both sides, which is another method that I teach, is to stay symmetrical and to bring the ball into your wheelhouse. Play two hands on both sides when you warm up. So we're going two hands on both sides. And Eric starts, Jack, have you ever thought about dying and death? I go, well, yeah, I don't like to think about it much. It's just not my thing. He goes, well, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. He goes, you realize that when you die, you fall asleep and you never, ever, 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 ever wake up again. This is a 14-year-old kid.
14-year-old. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I do realize that, Eric. And so we're getting connected and we're having a nice time. And I go, okay, you want to move back to the court now? After about 5-10 minutes, probably 10 minutes, because we were having this heavy conversation. He goes, no, I just want to stay short court. He says, I want to stay short court the whole hour. He says, I feel so connected. I feel so good. Let's just stay short court and talk. Which is this is a weird story. And so we're doing two hands on both sides. And then we play lefty short court. And then we play righty short court. We don't work on a serve. We don't volley. All we do is stay short court. And then it's time to go. I said, I'll meet you down there. I said, you run. You got to hurry. I'll pick up the balls. You go. And I said, I have 1 more hour lesson. I said, but I'll be there. And I said, listen, you know how connected you feel now? He goes, yeah. He says, I've never felt so good. Because short court for an hour, think about that. Yeah. He says, I feel so connected. I said, no matter what happens today. I said, because we haven't hit from the baseline, so it could be funny. And this kid, Jonathan, hit a huge topspin, big Western grip, runs around his backhand, nothing but topspin, like Jack Sock type. And so I said, no matter what, I said, I don't care if you're down 6-0, 5-0. I said, you just tell yourself, get connected. Like Agassi, I told him. I said, you know how Agassi gets? He'll lose the first set. And then once he gets on a roll, you can't beat him. I get to the match. His mother just gives me the biggest dirty look. I shouldn't even tell you this, but she gave me the biggest dirty look. He's down 6-love, 4-love. And I get there and I look at him. He smiles. He was one of those kids. He doesn't throw his racket. He was really mellow kid. He ends up winning the match 7-5, 6-1 in the third. And he said, yeah, he says, I saw you and I just remembered what we were doing. And I just said, okay, just be quiet. Just bring it in like I'm short court. All of a sudden, he literally couldn't miss. Kid Jonathan went out of his mind. He couldn't win a point. At 4-love, he couldn't win another point practically. Right? He won one more game. And I think at 4-4, he won another game, went to 5-4 and really didn't win another game. Just one more game. And so that was probably one of my favorite stories I've never told because it was a pretty bizarre story.
Yeah, that was a really good like coaching moment, right? Like you can kind of attribute the win to the advice you gave him, and then he sees you. Sounds like out of a movie almost.
Yeah, I just said whatever happens, I don't care if you're down 6-0, 5-0, you can get connected, and once you're connected, you own the guy. Once you connect to him, you know him better than he knows himself.
Yeah.
And that was a fun one.
That's great. So Jack, thanks for hopping on today. I know all the listeners can find more on you at brodytennis.com. Is there anywhere else they should connect to find your stuff?
Well, if they forget how to spell my name is spelled funny. So if they forget that, they can just go nonlineartennis.com.
Perfect. Okay.
Just
nonlineartennis.com. And we're going to link to that in the show notes as well. Any last requests of the audience or any kind of tips or anything you want to leave them with?
Just realize that you can, it's never late. I started playing left-handed in my 50s, and I love playing left-handed now from the baseline, serving, everything, pickups. I love playing lefty. So try to be open-minded and don't really, I would ask people why. You know, if a coach tells you, I want you to step on your volley or lay your wrist back, ask why. You know, if it's just because they said, well, I said so. Well, try to say, you know what, I'd like to have a philosophy behind your tip. Give me a philosophy. Give me something.
Right.
And I think, I really do think everyone can be a beautiful player. I mean, if you got a pair of hips and, you know, you got a head in the middle of your body, you know, you can do it. You know, I mean, you can play like a natural athlete. Just be open to it. And yeah, I'd like to have them read my 20-minute book. I think that would expand their mind. It's free. It's at the website. So I would encourage them to do that. I really would.
Cool. Great advice. Yeah, we'll link to that. Like Jack said, it's never too late to keep improving your technique. He learned how to play left-handed at 50 years old. So that's I started my saber at 61. I love sabering now. It's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things to do is sneak in and take anyone's serve, even my 17 and 18-year-old boys. And they laugh because they see this old codger coming in. But I started working on the saber at 61. Yeah.
So, and I served 2 baskets of balls last week. So I'm still trying to stay in the hundreds, 100 mile an hour on my serve. So yeah, I just think that's the beauty of tennis above all the other paddle sports, you know, paddle or platform or pickle. I just think tennis is really open to develop your whole body. You know, it's really the sport of a lifetime, where kind of like the way I compare stand-up paddleboarding to surfing, right? Surfing, you're in there and you got this beautiful, this non-linear motion and you're coiling and you're uncoiling. And then when you get on a stand-up paddleboard, you're just kind of paddling. Yeah. And so I think tennis is the beautiful sport. Of all the paddle sports, racket sports, I think tennis is the one. Still the king of sports to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jack, for all the advice. And everyone can go to brodytennis.com. We'll link to everything in the show notes. And we will talk to you next time.
It's nice talking to you, Will. It's great to see you after all these years. Thanks.
Will here with the Tennis Tribe, and thanks for watching that video. If you found that helpful, be sure to click the thumbs up button below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future videos. And if you want even more doubles lessons, go to thetennistribe.com and sign up for our weekly doubles newsletter. Every Thursday, I send you my best doubles tips and strategies to help you become a smarter, more effective doubles player. You can also listen to our podcast, the Doubles Only Tennis Podcast, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.